You know what's better than perfect? Done. Done is better than perfect. That was a super quick quote from Jane Victore's book, Feck Perfuction, and here to discuss it today is Chris LaFay. So, Chris, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this. This is a book that I've been wanting to read for the last few months, so thank you for forcing me to sit down and actually do it. I'm excited about it.
Nice. Well, that's always my first question because I say our guests get to pick the book. So you picked this book, and so it's because you wanted to read it. So now that you've read it, here we are to talk. So what are some of the main things you took away from it?
So it's a unique book, right? It's not this 150, 200 page, we'll just call it story, even for a business book. It's this very divided up, almost like parable-esque type of content. And honestly, I personally prefer that. I read very slowly, and I would prefer more bite-sized chunks to dig through and pull very small tidbits from throughout the course of it, rather than sitting and reading through an elongated start to finish book. Mm-hmm. On the flip side, this came recommended from a guy named Benj Miller, who I know, who I like and respect a lot. And
I know Benj.
There's that
good
piece
dude.
of it too. And the whole idea behind just getting started and not worrying about perfection just resonates with me overall. And so all three of those pieces put together was this is something that I want to read.
Gotcha. Very cool. Yeah, the thing you said, just getting started is important, which it is, but this book also talks about, that quote I just shared, just getting finished is important too, not getting hung up on perfection there, which is dangerous. I think I lean too far into what the book promotes here and it's good enough. And it's fortunate I have a business partner that leans too far the other way, where she wants everything perfectly polished. And so we're able to usually meet in the middle and have something she doesn't waste too much time making it perfect, but she forces me to take it a few steps further than I might have dumped prematurely. So it works out pretty well.
I have been, and still am, a perfectionist. I want everything to be 100% done. And it's interesting because in my work life, I'm okay with good in general, especially when it comes to internal work. I'm okay with good, let's get it started. With client-facing work, I'm definitely a little bit more on the side of perfectionism and things along those lines. In regular, just personal life, none of those things apply. And as long as it is in some form of being done, that is all I care about. Nice. And so it's just interesting to see the different aspects of personal life and work life and how all that interconnects together, of how much are you fecking perfection effectively. So
yep. Interesting. Yeah. Another thing I really drew from this book that was interesting and goes against a lot of the other stuff I read, so I'm curious your thought on that, is his take on the muse, kind of the inspiration that strikes. So he says, the most common knowledge about the muse is that she won't find you at your desk, in an office, or on a schedule, which you need to go out and be inspired. But then Seth Godin talks all the time about no, you need to just do the work and the inspiration will come. And so he's shared the quote from Somerset Maugham, I think I've shared it in here before, that said, I write only when inspiration strikes. Fortunately, it strikes every morning at 9 o'clock sharp. So it's basically saying if you sit down and start writing, you'll have some garbage, but then it'll get here. But this book is kind of saying the opposite. No, you can't just find it at your desk. You need to go out and find the muse. What are your thoughts there?
So I have recently started, and honestly, this is in thanks to you indirectly, is I have started blocking off one day of my calendar to where it is my writing day. And I know we're talking about creativity in general here, but honing on specifically with this is I block off every Friday, no meetings unless there is just a fire that only I can handle. And that is my writing day. I write my blog post that day. I write my LinkedIn content. If there's an email newsletter that needs to go out, things along those lines, all of that is done that day on schedule. And I have found so far that having that type of structure in my life has allowed me to turn my brain off during that period of time, and I have something to look forward to. And I think that by looking forward to that Friday allows me to be able to, when I do have these creative muse ideas kind of sporadic throughout the week, I can jot them down, put them in a safe place, knowing that come Friday, I can expound upon them. And at that point, it doesn't really matter where I'm at. And I'm definitely a kind of like the Seth Godin mindset of schedule it, start, and do it, and it'll get done. And it might not be the best first draft. It might need editing. It might need all that. But the way that I work and the way that I have seen success is scheduling it, getting it done. And if I can actually get out of these four walls here, all the better. That's going to help. But if I'm consistently getting out of these four walls during the course of the week, intentionally talking to new people, hearing their opinions and thoughts and ideas of things, and putting myself into different situations throughout the week, that schedule time on Friday, being highly structured, really helps.
Yeah, you're kind of doing both. And that's similar to what I do as well, where you're getting the muse is finding you throughout the week as you're out and about, but then you're saying, okay, you capture it, make sure you put it in a trusted system somewhere. We talked about getting things done on the show a couple weeks ago. Having that trusted system is huge to make sure you save those things, but then when it comes time to write all your stuff there, you're not having to be as creative because you have the creative thought from before. You can re-inspire yourself and get going. And I'm not as diligent as you in terms of blocking off a specific day. I write periodically throughout the week as I have time, but I have a list of ideas that I reference. Okay, here's my 20 ideas. Which one jumps out to me today, or which 2 or 3 a handful of those from when I was inspired before.
And I've gotten into a habit, because one of the things I'm doing now, and I've done this for the last couple of months, is I live in the suburbs. There's a lot of really cool people in Atlanta that I'd like to meet. And so I go into Atlanta and I meet with new people pretty much every single week. And what I've started doing is I blocked off my Tuesdays to go down to Pont City Market. And that's where I try to meet people on a regular basis.
Nice.
When I meet with people, what I do is as soon as that meeting is over, and we talk about a wide array of topics, right? Everybody's different. Everybody has different stories. I'll record a voice memo as soon as that meeting is over because I get a lot of my ideas from these conversations. Okay. And so I'll record a voice memo of just me talking about all the various different topics, any quotes that I remember that other person saying, and just voice memo it all down on my phone. Get that transcribed, which it does automatically now, which is fantastic. And I put that into my note system. And then from there, I can typically derive various different pieces of content over the course of the next couple of months. And so when I'm consistently doing that, that is a part that helps me during that process of just being intentional about hearing different points of view. Like, the art of being intentional, of meeting new people, hearing their perspectives on life, you're going to find a lot of commonalities, and that's also fun. But then there's those fringe areas where there's these like unique differences and whatnot, and being able to dive into those and ask better questions of those really allows the creativity and the curiosity to really be prevalent in a lot of life.
Yeah, I love that. Your intentionality with that is fantastic, and I do meet with a lot of new folks when I can, but again, you having a specific day to do it and planning ahead, and I think you do it a lot better than most folks I know, including myself, so kudos on that. I also love that you take the time, and most people should, but a lot of people don't. I wrote about this on my blog not long ago, is you make these voice memos, and then you actually go back through and unpack them and pick them apart and do that. I see people, the example I use is people taking pictures of slides at conferences. I remember there were some slides on the screen, people would take pictures, and I bet 90% of those pictures lived in their phone, and like they'll get the memory a year later, like, oh yeah, that was fun, but they didn't actually unpack what they tried to capture. You do a good job of that. And I don't want to get off track here, but I'm curious, where does all this live? What is your note system you're putting this into?
So, I know that you've been an Obsidian person for a very long time. You got me hooked on Obsidian. Notions, just the way Notion interconnects things and how dynamic it is, it won me over a few months ago.
Nice.
And so being able to view data in a lot of different ways and having everything highly structured that way, that visual piece really helped connect me to what I was writing. And so Notion's where I've been storing all this. Thankfully, they have a free plan. Super excited about that.
Well, their paid one's super cheap, too, so they do a good job, yeah.
Exactly. And so I'm very much a UI guy, and their UI is something that is very comfortable for me. And so I've created a tagging system within Notion for various content ideas, whether it's for blogs, emails, LinkedIn content, etc. And so that's where I do a lot of my drafting. And then when I take these voice memos and I get them transcribed, I'll put them into one of those buckets as basically not uncategorized, but unexpounded upon, if you will.
Yep.
So that when I go to Friday, I can then look at my unexpounded thoughts, figure out how they plug into everything else, and then start writing about them and creating whatever I want to create from them. At that point, it's easy.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I had my whole life in Notion for a while, and I still have a lot of it there because it is a fantastic system. I have nothing against it to say. I do think, though, we'll be doing another recording here soon. You and I will do a video walking through some of your Notion. I'd love to unpack some of that and get some tips from you, and I'll show you some of what I'm doing, and that could be fun in and of itself. But yeah, again, I knew it was getting us down a rabbit trail, and I am. So let's get back on here. But that's fantastic to know. Another piece I pulled out that I love, and I've written about this quite a lot, and I love he talked about it, is I don't know. And so the quote I pulled from the book, he said, the prominent Jewish scholar and philosopher Maimonides wrote, teach your tongue to say, I don't know, and ye shall progress. And so the ability to say, I don't know is so difficult these days, but I think it's so crucial. It reminds me a lot of the book I Never Thought of It That Way, which I've been thinking about a lot lately because it talks a lot about Democrats versus Republicans and mindsets and all that. And of course, at this recording, we're a week before the election, and when this comes out, it'll be a week after, but it's still right in that mindset. And so understanding, my big thing is understanding why someone might vote differently than you. Half the country is going to vote different than you did and be very confident in that vote, and you're going to say, they're idiots. I can't believe they would vote for that person. And what are they doing? But they have their reasons. At least understanding why they might do that, I think, is important. Disagreeing wholeheartedly. I disagree completely with people that vote differently than me. But I understand, because of that and that. And, I don't know is an important thing to learn.
And saying what I've realized, so I'm very much a people pleaser. And so I really enjoy, I want there to be harmony. I don't want there to be friction at all. And so on that same side of that token, I also don't think very well on my feet in a lot of cases. Not everyone, but a lot of them. And so being comfortable with saying I don't know has been paramount for me because of that combination of people pleasing and wanting to find a solution, not having any friction, talking over myself, trying to basically stumble through 100,000 words, trying to think on my feet and providing an actual answer while saying absolutely nothing at the same time doesn't do anybody any good. And so being able to say I don't know, but also if you're not comfortable with saying I don't know, also just bouncing back and asking a simple question of why is that important? And pushing the dialogue further rather than trying to cut it off or rather than trying to prove a point. I think that's part of that mixture of the personality that I know that I have is I'm not necessarily trying to prove a point, but I'm trying to instill confidence that I know what I'm doing. And then I just end up looking like a fool. And so being able to say, I don't know, and ask the question why have been integral in kind of getting over that hump for me.
Yeah, I love the idea from James Keen said, when somebody persuades me that I'm wrong, I change my mind. What do you do? So it's like being actually open to having your mind changed. And I mean, that goes to politics and everything else. Like, I don't think you're going to change my mind on that, but I'm open to it. I want to hear why you believe what you do. And I mean, that's why I've gone from iPhone to Android over the years and from Notion to Obsidian and different things because I know what works for me, but I want to hear more. And sometimes it changes my mind or other times it just teaches me more about what I already believe.
And I'm also of the mindset too, especially when it comes to researching and diving into something that's new to you, whatever that is, it doesn't really matter. I don't like the idea of doing hours and hours and hours and hours of research when somebody that I know and trust already has figured out the solution for them. And so rather than diving down a rabbit trail of what car should I buy, I'm going to go talk to one or two people who I know and I trust and who understand the types of qualities that I'm looking for. And I'll go to them and say, hey, you just did this 6 months ago. Tell me about what you found. Because I don't know. And if I sense a lot of, consistency in those responses, I'm just going to dive down that and just be done and not spend a lot of time because I'm comfortable with not knowing and being okay with that. If other people that I trust and know more about that particular area than me have already spent probably way too long
Right.
trying to research that decision, there's no reason for me to do the same thing. Not it's going to waste time.
Yep. And that's frustrating as a marketer. And you're in the same boat. We have very similar agencies, knowing we're doing all this work for SEO and to get better stuff on social media and do all this. That does drive us some traffic and help our clients. But the overwhelming majority of people that find us and that find our clients are from referrals from their friends, because they say, I don't know, what kind of web agency I need, or I don't know what kind of product I need, and they talk to their friends, and their friends point in the right way. So that's where being on social helps, staying top of mind and stuff. But ultimately, so much comes down to referrals, which are not directly in your control, and it's frustrating, but that's good.
So I'm actually going to flip this around. I'm going to ask you a question. So there was a part in this book that the quote is, the good news about your new role as a guide is the positive effect that you can have on the world around you. The world needs more teachers to share the wealth of their compassion and empathy, their excitement and their enthusiasm. Accepting your role as teacher instantly makes you a better person. Lead by example, see yourself reflected in others, and be responsible for your actions and your legacy. So something I've realized recently, I'm in a couple of various mentorship groups and things like that. I know you are as well, right?
Yep.
And I've had this question pop into my head a couple times over the last few months, and I don't have an answer for it actually. But all these people are very intentionally pouring into me. They're teaching me, they're helping me, they're answering my questions. And I flipped that around on myself recently and was like, who are you teaching? Who are you leading and guiding? So my question for you is, are you teaching or leading or guiding anybody right now? And how has that impacted you?
Oh, good question. I mean, I try to teach a lot just because I found that's one of the best ways to learn. I mean, even answering this question, you're making me kind of rethink some things and formalize my thoughts. And that's why I blog every day too. Most of my blog posts are answering questions, but it's me thinking through the answer and really formulating my thoughts and taking time to do it teaches me a lot. I remember some years ago, we've hosted a meetup every month for, 11 years now. But when GDPR was first coming out in the late teens, the general data privacy regulations in Europe, that was going to affect websites. I don't understand this thing. So why don't I teach our next meetup? I'm going to teach about GDPR, and it forced me to learn it and get it in layman's terms. And then, of course, even during the meetup, people asked questions I didn't know, and other people had answers, and the process of teaching helped a lot. So I think, and heck, through this podcast, I think we're almost teaching others to a degree. It's not quite the same, and I do mentor a high school student, and that's been very eye-opening just to understand his experience with school and stuff, especially with AI. That's to get off a rabbit trail, though. But I ask him about AI a lot, and the school is just like, no, AI doesn't exist. Close your eyes, well, that's not good, but that's that's a different conversation. But I try to teach a lot because I learn so much from teaching, and then of course try to learn from others. I mean, most of my blog posts come from books where I'm learning where others teaching me in the book, and then I try to pull out pieces, tie them to other experiences, and put that into something different. So I think teaching is paramount, and it helps establish authority and trust for potential clients. And I mean, there's not really a downside. You could potentially waste your time, but again, even if someone asks me a question I already know, it's going to solidify the answer in my mind, or they may disagree a little bit, which would be fantastic, and there's always ways to learn more. So, yeah.
And that's an interesting way to think about it, because while I've been pondering this, I've more been bucketing kind of that teaching aspect to one-on-one mentorship, because that's just what I've been, the world I've kind of lived in really heavily over the last year or so. And so I like the zooming out of yes, there is an aspect of teaching that is more around that mentorship and that one-on-one advising, but everything that you're doing in some way, shape, or form can be looked at that in some way. If you're being intentional about sharing your knowledge, sharing your process, talking about what you're thinking and what you're learning, and publicizing that out in some way, that is teaching.
Yep.
It's just not the mindset that I was having at the time, and that's a really interesting way to look at that, and I appreciate that shift.
And really I've shared before, that's why I blog instead of journal. If someone journals every day, kudos, that's fantastic. But you can sort of get away with dumping your thoughts and leaving them there. And by blogging, it forces me to sharpen a little bit. what was that actual quote? And did that really tie to this? Like, I want it to be a little more polished, which forces me to think through it and refine my answers a bit more and learn more in the process. So, yeah.
And like everything, and blogging is, I mean, obviously there's ways to make that internal, but you know, anything that's on the internet is going to be out there in some way, shape, or form.
Right,
but like
yeah.
by doing it in a public setting as well, requires you to have that polish and requires you to have that, like, not necessarily this is my full takeaway, because there's a million different ways to blog, but it forces you to think through kind of almost A, B, and C, and not just kind of trail off, kind of
Right.
like what you can do in a private journal. You need to kind of wrap things up in some way, shape, or form. It's a good storytelling mechanism.
Yeah.
And
that goes, sorry, I was just going to say, that goes back to our original topic here of how much do you polish too, though. I mean, I polish a blog more than I would a journal, but in my case, I still don't polish it that much. I want to,
Yeah.
done is better than perfect, you know. So if you read my blog, you will definitely see they're not perfect, but they're done and they should be pretty good. So yeah.
And
You know.
at the end of the day, you don't have to write these like exactly similarly structured posts that are, you know, copy and paste with the right structures, the right headings, etc. Like, just getting your thoughts and ideas out there, somebody can learn from that.
Yep.
Whether
for
it's
sure.
50 words like Seth Godin is amazing at doing,
Yep.
or, you know, longer-winded things that are more tutorial driven or more really of a deep dive, both have equal weight at the end of the day. And rather than trying to go to make it perfect, get it to where it's done and out there. I talk a lot about, or I have talked a lot about to some of the people that I know, like your basics or somebody else's breakthroughs. And just by talking about a topic with the inherent bias that you have of your entire life's history, you're going to say something basic in a way that somebody else hasn't heard it before. It's that whole concept of your parents tell you something like 25 times and you never do it. Then your random friend Joe Schmo from school is like, hey, bud, ever think about this? And then you start doing it, and your parents are like pulling their hair out of like,
Right.
told you this 100 times, man. And so just getting it out there in a good enough format, in a way that tells your story in your way, no matter how basic it is, doesn't matter.
Yeah, well said. We're getting a little low on time, but I had one more section I wanted to hit, and then we'll see if you have anything else here. But I love this because I'm sure you see this a lot too. So it's a longer quote here, but he says, bad art makes you say, wow, huh? Good art makes you say, huh? Wow. Looking at bad art is like eating fast food. You're excited about the thought of it. When it hits your stomach, the relationship ends quickly. Good art is seen but not immediately understood. Huh? And then comes the aha moment when the subtext, the real meaning unfolds and our mind expands. And so I know for us, and I'm guessing for you, when we show work to our clients, they shouldn't say, wow. They should say, oh yeah. They should either be a little confused or just, yeah, it should just make sense. It shouldn't be a surprise at that point when you work it out. However, for the work that their clients see, it should be more easily explained. It should be more of a, yeah, the question shouldn't come up at all. I'm curious your thoughts on that, on your work to your clients versus the work you do for their clients.
So it's all about the right type of curiosity at the right time, right? I've been going back to this word curious a lot over the last month or so. And when you're thinking about websites, when you're telling the story for the very first time and you're building a website with that particular person, it's not public facing yet. You're working with them to figure out how are we going to unlock curiosity for their potential customers. And so there's this initial moment when you're looking at these like wireframes and mock-ups and all these other things, because that story necessarily hasn't been 100% finalized quite yet. And so you're working through that initial, I know what the story is, I see these things here, I'm trying to figure out exactly how these pieces are going to come together. And that's part of what we do. We figure out those pieces. But then we're looking at curiosity on the other side as well, because then when a client comes and views that site, they need to have that wow perspective, because you still want to have curiosity. At the end of the day, we're telling a story, right?
Yep.
You have to pique curiosity. You can't just say everything in plain straight English. We build WordPress sites. Here's what we do. Here's how, like, you can't, it's like a plumber's site, right? It's like, here's the 25 services, pick whichever one you want.
Right.
Doesn't matter. Force them to read through every piece of that information. Nobody is going to. So you have to tell a story that piques that end customer's curiosity.
Yep.
To make them feel the feeling of, oh yeah, that does feel like me. That is the problem that I'm having.
Yep.
And so you have to pique curiosity in that way. And so you have to, how you tell that story and where you place curiosity really determines success. Now, there's no metric I can't necessarily say. If you place curiosity here versus there, you can tell a huge difference. Yeah. But it's that feeling that customer gets when they go there and they're like, oh yeah, that's me. I feel connected there.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say placement-wise, I would put curiosity a step later for the end client, though, where they should come to your site and immediately say, oh, that is my problem. They get me. And then say, well, now what do? How do they solve that problem? And then they have the curiosity behind it. But I think if you make clients curious too much up front, they've got 4 other tabs open with all your competitors, and they're going to say, I don't quite get this. Let me find one that's more clear. So I think if you can clearly state how you serve them versus what you do, say, oh, that's the problem I had. They get me. Now I'm a little curious about learning more, and it can really spark something there. It's a good way to put it. Fantastic. So this has been great, Chris. This is awesome. For those of you that haven't read the book, it's only like a 2.5 hour Audible, so like a 2.5 hour read. It's a short book. Yeah, there. If you're watching the video, there it is. But it's fantastic. I encourage you to check it out. Chris, if people want to find out more about you, where can they track you down?
Connect with me on LinkedIn. I post a lot about entrepreneurship and web, and then you can also hit up ClassicCity.com if you're looking to have some web help. And if you don't like how I do web, you should go talk to Mickey because he does web too. There you go.
And vice versa. It works out. Yeah, I'll put those links in the show notes so y'all can check them out. So, Chris, this is fantastic. I'll chat with you soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, man.
See ya.